Good afternoon, everybody. I think we will hold off for 1 or 2 more minutes to give folks a chance to hop on, and then we will get started. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. First, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for our third webinar in our Planners webinar series. This is called this is called Empowering Communities, Economic Development. We have a fantastic speaker today in Lee Llewellyn, and Lee is a strategic facilitator and expert on the dynamics of consensus building, has managed complex projects involving multiple individuals, institutions, and media in over 30 Indiana counties. He served as the first president and CEO of the Indiana Economic Development Association and as vice president of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. We welcome everybody again, and I will turn the presentation over to Lee. Before we do that, a little bit of information regarding questions. If you have questions or comments, please put those in the chat, and we will answer those questions. We'll leave 10 to 15 minutes or so at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So again, thanks for joining us, and we will get started here with Lee Llewellyn. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks to the Center for Energy Education for providing this opportunity for the webinar and an opportunity to present some thoughts about how we can view a renewable energy project coming into our community. As Lisa mentioned, I spent 10 years with the Indiana Economic Development Association. Most of my career has been involved in and around economic development. And when I first started getting engaged with renewable energy projects and talking about this, one of the things that I was impressed with was when I would talk to local elected officials or I would talk to planners or economic developers, they would get really hung up on, well, I really don't understand, how a solar panel makes electricity. And I don't exactly know how, a wind turbine, does what it does. And they were really hung up on sort of the technicalities of a renewable energy project. And one of the things that I would always say to them was, you don't have to know how to program a robot to know that you want a new Honda plant in your community. You don't always have to understand a lot of those details. What we need to do is understand that for most of these projects, they look a lot like any kind of traditional economic development project. And so learning to understand the economic benefits, learning to understand how the process works, that it's very similar to probably things that you've already done many times in your community, really helps us understand how it fits within sort of the economic structure of what we're already doing in our communities. One of the first things we did when I was with the Economic Development Association was develop a definition of economic development that was not jobs focused. So many of the communities that I would talk to and I would say, well, how do you evaluate an economic development project? And they would say, well, just jobs. And the main reason that we want jobs with an economic development project is that they bring jobs bring money in the form of wages, and those wages, circulate through the community. But there are also a lot of other aspects about an economic development project: the tax base, the inflow of dollars from outside the community. So our definition was really focused on that economic development is the facilitation of an investment that leads to long-term community prosperity. And so it's really trying to focus on a variety of the economic impacts that a project brings into the community. And that's some of what I hope to talk about today, is both why we want those projects from sort of a macro scale, but then also at a micro level, at a community level, what are the benefits that we see long term with those projects. So if we think about a traditional economic development project, it involves first site selection. A company may hire a site selector. They are looking for sites around the country that fit their needs, that meet their needs in terms of infrastructure or location. They will go through a process of, looking at various sites. As they begin to focus in on a specific site, they will go through a negotiation process, looking at benefits, looking at support. They will look at the financial considerations. What does the community bring to the table? And then ultimately, from the local perspective, we're always looking at that economic impact. And what I hope to say today and share with you today is how those basic steps from a traditional economic development project really pretty closely mirror the process that a renewable energy project goes through as they are looking where to locate those sites. So part of the reason why we're so concerned about renewable energy right now is that we're starting to see, certainly across the United States, that right now energy demand is increasing much faster than how we are developing supply. And so that is a true consideration as we start looking at, one of the biggest drivers right now in a lot of local economic development projects are data centers. And data centers use a tremendous amount of electricity. And we're starting to see in many states and many locations, just for one example, as that data centers are coming in, the demand for energy is now starting to outstrip the supply, at least the local supply. And so this has become not only a local consideration, but also a national one. We're also looking at cost competitiveness. As we look at the cost of fossil fuels continuing to rise, to stay competitive, to be able to meet that demand and do it economically, renewable energy resources sometimes now are approaching a much more competitive cost advantage as a way of supplying energy. Certainly, we're looking at access again to those fossil fuels, but then also looking at the capacity of the electrical grid. We're certainly seeing a lot of changes in terms of federal and state policies, even as a lot of the federal subsidies are now going away. We still see that renewable energy is a cost competitive solution for addressing some of our energy demands. We hope long term, and this is probably since the mid 1970s, when we saw OPEC and the change in fossil fuel price that we long-term have had a policy of decreasing our dependence on oils and fossil fuels. And we're also seeing now, from a customer perspective, a lot of major corporations are demanding and expecting more renewable energy in their energy portfolios. So unfortunately, a lot of if you're viewing this from outside of Indiana, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today are Indiana specific details. But I think you can certainly take note of what some of these graphs and what some of this information is talking about. And a lot of this will be available to you for your state or for your locality. So make note of, what some of these statistics are, and then, spend a little bit of time looking for something comparable for your state. One of the drivers for Indiana right now is a graph and information that was produced. Indiana Electricity Projections was prepared for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission by Purdue University. You can see that right about where we are right now, around 2025, we are already in Indiana at a point where our demand is exceeding our existing resources for producing electricity within the state of Indiana. What that means for us long term is that we will have to produce, or we'll have to procure energy from outside of Indiana, meaning that we will have to go onto the market and bid for that electricity. This is a recurring theme in a lot of states right now. That drives up the cost of local electricity because we don't have that local supply. One of the things that we often hear is, that, renewable energy is only competitive from a cost advantage because of federal subsidies or state subsidies. To counter that assertion, there is an international company. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce the name of the company, Lazard or Lazard. I'm sure it's Lazard. They are an international banking firm, an investment bank that is located in the United States, but also has offices in Europe and elsewhere. So they could provide consultation to their clients about the most appropriate ways to invest in energy. They developed a process for being able to, on an equal basis, compare the cost of many different energy production technologies: nuclear, gas peaking, coal, geothermal, gas combined cycle, solar, and wind. What they were able to do in terms of what is now called a levelized cost of energy is that they've developed a formula, and I won't try to even understand, but it includes investment expenditures minus any government subsidies, operation and maintenance expenditures, fuel expenditures, electric energy generated, cost of capital, and expected lifetime of the facility. And in doing that, they are able to come up with, again, what they call the levelized cost of energy. And what you can see on this graph, the yellow, for example, is the cost of solar energy. And you can see that over time, coming up to 2016 and beyond, that cost is now probably among the lowest. Coal continues to escalate a little bit. Gas peaking is one of the most expensive. What has enabled the cost of solar to decline over time is that as the number of solar panels that are being manufactured has increased, the cost has come down. What makes renewables cost competitive compared to others is that once those costs of construction are underway, there is not a cost for fuel as there is for nuclear or gas or coal. The employment base is relatively low compared to, again, nuclear, coal. So over time, we've seen that the cost of renewables has become much more competitive in terms of overall cost. Another thing that's driving renewable energy demand is that we see a number of national and international companies who are demanding that a certain proportion of their energy supply come from renewables. So you can see at the bottom actually a greater demand from Amazon, that they have a larger mix of renewables. Meta, which we think of as Facebook, Google, Walmart is on the list, Apple's on the list, Target, General Motors. These are all companies that, because of customer demand, have come back to their utility suppliers, and are expecting that they see a mix, a proportion of renewables being available to them through their energy supply. Once electricity enters onto the grid, obviously there's no way of knowing whether the electricity you're receiving is coming from a renewable source or a fossil fuel source. But within those utilities that are providing, they are able to say that they have a percentage of their electricity that's being generated by renewables. And so that's what the companies like Amazon, like McDonald's, like Walmart are looking to see within that portfolio how much of the electricity that's being generated is being generated from a renewable source. So again, paralleling a traditional economic development project, a renewable project, and in this case it's solar project, follows much of the same kind of process in terms of site selection. They're obviously looking for a location in which there is at least solar capacity of a certain period of time. During the year, during the day, there's an average in which, the sun is shining and not obscured by clouds. They're also looking for a relatively flat topography, so that, again, as they're putting in the solar panels, they are going to be able to be fairly level and receiving the solar rays during the day. They have to have critical land mass, meaning that typically for a utility scale industrial project, they're probably looking for at least 200 acres. And in many cases, it may go up to 1,000 or more. They have to have willing landowners, those landowners that are willing to enter into lease agreements for a 20, 25, or 30-year period of time. And also, most critical is that that land has to have at least nearby access to the electrical grid. It has to be able to be put out onto the grid so that it is available to purchasers down the line. How we receive our electricity throughout the United States, there are a number of transmission organizations. You can see that, for Indiana, we have the Mid-Continent Independent, now I've forgotten what S stands for, systems operator. That covers a number of states throughout the middle of the United States, from Louisiana up to Canada. Indiana is also served by PJM, which is predominantly through the eastern United States. There's another ISO around New York. Unique amongst all of that is this area around Texas. You may recall back in 2021, there was a significant blackout in Texas because, as you can see, Texas is almost completely isolated from the rest of the other independent service operators, systems operators. During the winter of 2021, much of the electric generation capacity in Texas was incapacitated by cold temperatures, and there were rolling blackouts for a number of weeks that affected um, hundreds, if not thousands, of homeowners. So having the service operators like MISO in India that we have in the middle of the country enables us to be able to purchase electricity on the open market, so that if we have high demand in one place, MISO or the other operators are able to then move electricity from different parts of the country and meet that growing demand. Right now, we have some challenges with the electric grid, trying to establish new capacity and bring new generators online. And so being able to, again, as we're looking at those renewable energy projects, they have to be able to find space on the grid. They have to be able to connect. There is traditionally a waiting list to get contact onto the grid. But that is part of the process, is looking at both accessibility to the grid and then being able to find that capacity. So that is part of that site selection process that goes into looking at um, uh, where we locate renewable energy projects. So in a traditional economic development project timeline, again, there are many things that are happening behind the scenes before anybody knows that a company is looking at relocating or expanding. They're looking at, again, what is the demand for their product? What kind of sites do they need to be looking for that can meet the basic needs of the company? They will start engaging with the site selector to start looking at, where are the potential areas where we can locate. They'll do some high-level market analysis. They will then start doing some very specific research on communities, looking again at infrastructure, looking at workforce. Then they will start doing some very specific due diligence, working with the local community. And this is really something that's taking place over a period of about 3 to 4 years. From the time that the company makes a decision that they want to expand or relocate and goes through the process, it's really about a 4-year process. And when we look at a renewable energy project, we're also looking at probably a 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6-year process before the energy project is actually coming online. So they will start in the first couple of years of looking at talking to landowners, looking for those specific areas around the country where they see that they, again, have the right typology, where they're going to be. If it's a wind project, where is that? Where are those wind currents that will provide consistent wind for a wind turbine? Where do we have, adequate sun? Where do we have flat land that we can, acquire? They will start talking to those landowners, talking to them about lease agreements. One of the other things that's unique about a renewable energy project is a power purchase agreement. Often when the renewable companies are starting to look at a project, they will go to the existing utilities and negotiate a power purchase agreement where that utility will agree to purchase power that's produced by this project over a course of 10 or 20 years, maybe 30 years, depending on the life of the project. And they will agree to purchase that electricity at a certain rate per kilowatt, that then gives that renewable energy developer sort of the assurance that they are going to be able to fund and sustain that project over the length of the project. They will then also then begin to work with the local grid operator, whether it's MISO, PJM, or others, to start look for a space on the grid and get in the queue. And then they will usually obtain independent financing for the project. And only about year 4 or 5 will they actually then begin talking to the local communities, starting to get the permitting in place, starting to work on a number of agreements that are required for a renewable energy project. And then ultimately, somewhere around year 5 or 6, they may actually begin construction once all of those agreements are in place. So one of the big issues that comes up many times was we're talking about renewable energy projects, and that is often one of the key sticking points as we start working communities is looking at land use. There's always a conversation about because many of these projects end up on what is currently farm production land. There's always a conversation about, but are we taking this out of agricultural use? Is this really what we've intended this land to be used for? And part of what we start looking at is, there's really some advantages if we bring a solar project, for example, onto what is currently agricultural land. In many cases, we are going to be taking that land out of agriculture production for 10, 20, 30 years. But the way in which a solar project, for example, is developed on those lands, there is no real permanent infrastructure that goes into place. The solar panels and the racking is driven into the ground, but without concrete or without permanent infrastructure. So they will be able to be taken out at the end of the project. In many ways, when we look at a renewable project, particularly solar, they have sort of the benefits of the federal program reserve that's referred to as Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP. That's where the federal government pays farmers to set that land aside for a 10 or 20-year period of time so the land can renew and those nutrients can be restored. That's essentially what happens during the period of time that a solar project is there. The land is set aside. We're now starting to see that we have dual use in a number of our solar fields around Indiana, for example. You see a picture there of sheep grazing on a solar field in northwest Indiana. We have a number of now thousands of head of sheep that are grazing on the solar fields in northwest Indiana. Those sheep will be processed as meat and probably sold into the halal market in Chicago. It's a dual use. It's still an agricultural use. By putting the sheep on those solar fields, it reduces the cost of maintenance because they're able to keep the vegetation cut. We have in southeast Indiana, where we have many melon growers. We've found that solar fields are particularly good for growing melons because they do provide shade for the melons during part of the day. Melons are picked by hand, so there's not heavy agricultural equipment trying to go down between the fence or the solar rows. So agricultural use may still be part of that solar field, and certainly if we're looking at wind turbines allow the development and the continued farming around those turbines. So there really is at least a combination and opportunities where, as we look at solar fields, we look at wind turbines, the agricultural uses can still be prevalent in those developments. They may change over time, but it does, as we look at this, we find that by having those solar fields, there's a minimal disruption of soils. There's still an opportunity for doing some agricultural use, and long term, it may help restore the soil so that when it's returned to agricultural use, it's actually a more robust agricultural opportunity. Part of the process also is making sure that we have appropriate zoning ordinances in place. We have to keep reminding ourselves that when we're looking at zoning, it's really not about economics per se, but it's really about how we want to divide and how we want to make sure we're making the best use of the land in our communities. So it's making sure that we do have appropriate use for agriculture, for residential, for industrial, that we've thought about the impact of how we're going to use that land, and making sure, again, that we are preserving the best use and making opportunities for economic opportunities, also for quality of life. But in this case, it's also thinking about um, how we are allowing homeowners, landowners, to have the best use or make the best decisions about their own landowner rights. Um, so when we're looking at, again, on a renewable energy project, one of the things that we think about and we talk about as we're talking to farmers, in many cases, the lease payments that are paid to farmers are a viable way for them to diversify their income, for them to be able to preserve the local ownership of those farms. They are making individual decisions about their landowner rights. It's critical and important that, again, we are able to assemble the right size for a project, but also that we're preserving that local choice for the people who actually own the land. For a renewable energy project, this is another thing that is perhaps different from a traditional economic development project in that there are a number of very specific plans to be negotiated by the local elected officials. And some of these are very unique to a renewable energy project. I'm going to come back to the economic development agreement. I'm going to talk about first the road use ditch maintenance agreement. For most of these, what's maybe different from a renewable energy project from what we think of as a traditional economic development project. If we think of a traditional economic development project, let's think of a factory. We're going to have lots of trucks. We're going to have lots of automobiles for the workers that are going to be coming to the facility over a period of time. And so there is sort of a long-term infrastructure investment that the county has to make. For a renewable energy project, because there is not going to be a huge employment base, there's not going to be lots of trucks coming in and out during the course of the project, but certainly during construction, there's going to be a lot of heavy trucks. There's going to be a lot of heavy use during that period of time. And so one of the agreements that many communities then negotiate is a road use agreement in which the renewable energy development company enters into an agreement with the county in which they will restore or actually improve the quality of the roads at the project as they bring the trucks in. As those roads deteriorate, they will make an agreement then that they will restore those roads to at or better quality than they were before the construction began. That's very important because, again, many of these projects are going into agricultural land. Water management, certainly wastewater management is very important. And so making sure that there is a long-term ditch maintenance agreement in place and that there are specifications that the development company agrees to meet over the course of the project. Those are two very specific, very important agreements for the county to negotiate with the developer. One thing that I think that often gets overlooked, at least in terms of planning, although this is part of a standard process for many of the renewable projects, is a vegetation plan. It is important to make sure that the kind of vegetation that is placed in and around a renewable energy project, particularly a solar project, does not impinge upon the surrounding landowners. So it's very important that we, uh, the developer and the owner of that project monitors for invasive species that could have an impact on corn or soybeans or plants that are being grown adjacent to a project. They're going to be looking again at vegetation that does not grow too high so that it obscures the solar panels. So it's very important that the county negotiate and be very aware of the uses around the project, what's going to be planted and what's going to be maintained, and that is an agreement that the developer agrees to. A fourth plan is a decommissioning plan. This is a question that comes up often in many hearings for these renewable projects. Well, what happens when this project is all over? Again, these projects can go for 20, 25, up to 30 years. The developer in the decommissioning plan agrees to set aside, perhaps purchase a bond, agrees that at the end of 30 years, they will be responsible for restoring the land to its previous quality, that they will remove all of the racking and all of the infrastructure. And there's often provisions in those plans that they be updated on a regular basis as inflation may then change the cost of what it will require to decommission the project at the end, to make sure again that even if the project changes hands, if it's sold, or even if the developer goes out of business during that period of time, that the financial provisions are in place, that the money will be there to decommission the project at the end of its lifespan at no cost to the county. It's very important that that plan be in place. Now I'm going to go back to the economic development agreement and talk about that, and that will be part of the remainder of this presentation. An economic development agreement is unique to these projects in a way that most economic development projects do not have this type of an agreement. What we see with these projects is even when a renewable energy project may ask for tax abatement as part of their incentives, they will negotiate a separate agreement with the community in which they agree to a series of payments over a period of time. A couple of examples in Cass County, Indiana. I know that they have a solar project going in that over the course of 7 years, that renewable energy company will be paying approximately $10 million over that period of time in economic development payments, divided over that 7-year period of time. This is something that's negotiated separately. There are many different levels of that, but it's very important to understand that the economic development agreement is much different from anything that you may have done before. This is not a payment in lieu of taxes. It's not a pilot. In Indiana, pilot payments in lieu of taxes have statutory requirements over how those dollars can be spent. Economic development payments in a renewable energy project are very different. They do not have, at least in Indiana, there is no statutory overlay and how those dollars are spent, and so they are able to be spent at the discretion of the local elected officials. A couple of things here to talk about. I'm sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. One of the things, again, from an economic development standpoint that we're looking at and why renewable energy projects are important as part of economic development This is looking at the assessed value for Henry County, Indiana. You look out to 2021, and you can see that over those period of years, the assessed value in Henry County had continued to decrease. 2022, a solar project came onto the tax rolls. This solar project did not ask for tax abatement, and you can see that the assessed valuation started to increase over time. What that means, this is a separate county, this is Benton County, but this is what happened to their property tax rates as the wind farms in Benton County came on the tax rolls. Everyone in the county, whether they were near a wind farm or a wind turbine or not, saw their property tax rates decrease as the project came online. That again is one of the reasons why we do economic development projects, is to bring new assessed valuation online. So let me talk about and finish up here with talking about these economic development payments. It is important to understand that these payments create tremendous opportunities for counties to do things that they may not be able to do, that they would not be able to do with pilot payments. In Benton County, which I just talked about, they were able to instill a 3-county project in which they brought high-speed broadband to rural areas of their counties. They were able to build out that infrastructure at no impact on their tax rates and at no impact on their taxpayers. In Randolph County is a unique county in all of Indiana's counties in that they're the only county that I have worked with and that I know of who actually actively pursued renewable energy projects as an economic development target. In many other cases, the renewable projects come to the county because they find sites or opportunities there. Randolph County actually is the only county that I'm aware of that pursued renewable projects. They now have 7 projects. I believe they have 4 solar and 3 wind projects. And in terms of economic development payments, a county council member shared with me a few weeks ago that over the total of those 7 projects, the county will have realized over $65 million in payments that are outside of those statutory taxing requirements. And with the dollars that they have already received, they have been able to do school bleachers and replace a gym floor in an elementary school, resurfaced a track at a high school, developed a playground, locker room, new school roof and chiller. They were able to buy new sheriff and EMT vehicles. They made what's been interesting to look down the list of the projects that they have helped fund. They made no interest loans to their municipalities to be able to restore bridges and roads and do water and sewer projects, again, at no impact on their taxes. Again, and as those municipalities paid those funds back, they were able to reloan them and continue to do projects. They were able to install a $1.4 million new HVAC system in their courthouse. And what's unique is that they are able to buy 4-H memberships for every 5th grader in Randolph County. And again, they would not be able to do that with tax dollars. This was something that was unique, a unique opportunity for them to use those economic development payments. Also, then they have been able to, again, do community benefits. They've that $5,000 to town of Brookston. These are just some examples of things that they've been able to do. Actually, no, this is White County. In Indiana. My apologies. In that case, the renewable energy company has been able to do things like build a new facility within their 4-H county fairgrounds. They've been able to, again, do a number of local projects. And one of the biggest things that they have been able to do with the funds in White County that they would not have been able to do with taxpayers. For anybody in Indiana, we are very familiar with Indiana Beach. This is a facility. You see the picture on the screen of Indiana Beach in White County, Monticello, Indiana. It's a combination amusement park. It's a water facility. It's an entertainment venue. This provides, thousands of jobs in the summer. It provides tax base. It brings, thousands of people into White County every summer for recreation. A number of years ago, the owner of this facility had declared that they were going to close the facility and move all of their resources to other states. The White County commissioners were able to make a $3 million forgivable loan to a new purchaser, a new buyer for Indiana Beach, if they would promise to keep the facility open. White County, no county would have been able to make an investment like that with existing tax dollars, but the economic development payments gave them the flexibility to do that. So I moved through this fairly quickly, but I wanted to stay within our time frame. It's important, I think, to talk about, take some of the mystique and the mystery out of these renewable projects. Yes, it is a new technology. Yes, we may not thoroughly understand how we turn the sun into electricity, but from a local economic development, from a local elected official, from a planner standpoint, this is economic development, pure and simple. Yes, there is a tremendous need for us to bring new electrical capacity onto the grid, but from a local standpoint, the economic benefits from these renewable projects can be immense. So thanks for your time. I'll turn it back to Lisa and see if there are any questions or comments in the chat.
Thanks so much, Lee. That was fantastic. And I've heard this presentation, and every time I hear it, there's something new that pops up. But looking at the chat, if you have any questions, we have about 10, 12 minutes left. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. Let's see. Outstanding presentation. Should be involved in building an economic development plan. What was a comment that we got? Someone else is typing here. Let's see. So Lisa Oliver says, please describe any observations of generational shifts of farmers or landowners in acceptance or denial of land use, notably for solar installations.
So at some of the workshops that we've done with the Center for Energy Education, we have, and Lisa, you may be able to talk to this as well, because I think it's the farmer from Stark County who is very involved. And this term is always confusing, I think, when we talk about agrivoltaics. It sounds like it's something really, it's really, technical, but agrivoltaics is just a fancy word for the fact that he has sheep grazing on his solar field. And he comes in and talks about, he has, I think, 3 children. And as he's thinking about, his farm, that if he were to divide that farm amongst his 3 children, none of them would have enough land to have a sustainable farm. But with the lease payments that he is getting from that renewable project on his farmland, he is able to keep that farm in his family for his children, and they are able to sustain it. So I think it's part of what we're seeing. It may be almost counterintuitive, but it really is probably the older cohort of farmers who are probably more amenable to the renewable projects because they see that as a way of being able to keep the farm in the family and not have to sell it to one of the mega farm companies, because they can't sustain it financially, or by the time they would divide it up amongst all of the children, there would not be a revenue source that could sustain it. So I think we counterintuitively expect that it's probably the younger people who are more amenable to renewables, but it is what we're seeing is that it's probably some of the more legacy farmers who see it as a way the lease payments allow them to keep the farm locally owned and keep it in the family for a longer period of time. Is that what you hear, Lisa?
Absolutely, yes. We have heard a lot of stories from landowners, and everything from these type of projects saved our family farm, that was going to be sold at tax sale, and opportunities like this can really help local farmers. It can help them diversify. If there's a bad year with crop farming, this is an opportunity to help offset some of those kinds of bad years for farmers. And again, the family legacy and being able to pass their farm on to their children, their grandchildren, and in the case of our Stark County farmer, who is also a sheep grazer on one of the projects here. He is doing this a lot for his kids. One of his kids specifically wants to take over the family farm, continue, and what a great opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah, let's see here. A couple of other things. Okay, meant to ask, who should help build the economic development plan in a community?
Well, first of all, there are always attorneys involved in all of this. So, you want to be sure, again, that all of the contingencies, because these are very complicated agreements, but you want to make sure that all the contingencies are in place. And I think that there are probably depositories where you can look at, what other communities have done in terms of their decommissioning agreements, their road use agreements, and certainly their economic development agreements. I can tell you, I won't say who, but I would say most of the communities that I'm familiar with, roughly the economic development agreements will be somewhere around $1 million a year over a period of 7 to 10 years. But I've heard of one community that didn't ask questions and they got $1 million over 10 years. So I think looking at what other communities have done, I think those agreements usually, they're public agreements, so they should be accessible. There are certainly groups, that are, municipal advisors, financial advisors, should be at the table for looking at all of that stuff. And I'm always amazed at how much money changes hands on these projects. So it is always good to ask a lot of questions, to talk to counties that have done it before. It's always a learning process, but this is not. There's been enough of this done nationally that there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of existing agreements that you can look at, model, and again, it always never hurts to ask for all kinds of provisions to be in there, because I'm always amazed at what some of the counties ask for and get.
Exactly. If you don't ask, you won't get. So, all right, here's another question. Describe any trends, especially surprising ones, related to alternate land use for ag products or ag animals. Any similar examples like the ones you described about melons, other ideas and or outcomes?
Well, I know that Purdue University is looking at a short, a shorter stalk breed of corn that could be grown in and around solar fields. But right now, I think again, most of what we've heard about are, I mean, melons, strawberries, things that grow close to the ground. There are certain animals that you can't put in a solar field, or you don't want to. You don't want goats, by the way, because they like to butt things, and that knocks the solar racks out of alignment. Cows like to rub up against things, and that knocks the solar racks out of alignment. That's why it's typically sheep or grazing animals. I think again we learned. I think we learned this week or last that there is a breed of pig that will actually eat grass, and they're very small, that are now being grazed in the solar fields. Um,
That's
that
the Cooney pigs.
Yeah, right. That's right.
They don't root like normal pigs. They actually graze. And I've even heard recently that some of the projects are even putting chickens and some ducks
Yeah,
in the fields as well. So a lot of animals, and like Lee mentioned, as far as I mean produce. Any produce that you can pick, hand pick, can generally be grown under the panels. It's got to like a little bit of shade, a little bit of sun, and a lot of different uses. In addition to the pollinators that a lot of pollinating, um, bringing butterflies, making honey and those sorts of things are also some of the things that are happening in the solar farms themselves. So I don't see any additional questions, and we're just about at time. So I really would like to thank Lee Llewellyn again for joining us for today's planner webinar, and look forward to our September planners webinar, which will be around battery storage. And we will have more details about that. I believe we will be sending out a survey around today's webinar. And with that, there should also be a link or something that you can access to register for our September webinar. And we appreciate everybody attending today, and feel free to reach out with any questions. Lee's contact information is there, and you can always reach us at the Center for Energy Education. Again, thank you all and have a great afternoon.